Welcome to the Fixing Incentives podcast, where we talk about the incentives that drive success. Now, let's get started with the show.
David Melamed here. I'm the host of Fixing Incentives podcast, where I talk with top business leaders about their journey and the behavior that powered their growth. I have Dr. Jeremy Weiss here of Rise 25, who has done thousands of interviews with successful entrepreneurs and CEOs, and we have flipped the script and he'll be interviewing me.
David, I'm excited to chat because, and I don't know what you're going to say in this episode, by the way, but we were chatting a little bit to plan and you were like, I want to talk about the dumbest marketing mistake I've made. And I'm like, that sounds great. I'd love to hear about the dumbest marketing mistake you made. So I don't make it and other people don't make it. Before we get to that, this episode's brought to you by Tenfold Traffic. And I know for you, David, your biggest focus is you want to work on projects that are performance-based relationships. And what that really means is all marketing goes through you on your own dime, and you negotiate a revenue share because ultimately you're you're pouring your heart and soul into this stuff. And so I know if you're going to generate someone a lot of money, you want to be able to share in that, and also you're creating a lot of value. So you want to experience that full value. So I know you only work with maybe a few companies for the whole year to pour your heart and soul into. So if this sounds interesting to anyone, if you yourself are listening, this sounds interesting, or you know someone, the ideal partner for you is really someone who has a converting funnel and they can handle scale and let you work your magic because you can turn the dial up for people. And obviously the company has to know their lifetime value of a client and want to spend as much as they can to acquire the customers so they could dominate ultimately. So if this sounds interesting, go to davidmelamed.com. It's David, MELAMED.com, or you can email David at tenfoldtraffic.com. So the dumbest marketing mistake you ever made. Where do you want to start with that?
That's a great question. I've made so many dumb marketing mistakes. I almost feel like everything I know from just falling down a lot. But there's one that sticks in my mind because had I done this, it would have been one of the smartest things I could have done for my marketing. And the fact that I didn't, even though it was my job to do it, turned out to be really, really dumb and cost all of us a lot of time, energy, and missed opportunity. But I'm not sure where to start. I'll just start from the beginning. I was recruited into a startup that was buying junk cars. And so they were generating leads online, and they had a call center where people would, learn more about the car, price it, and then offer to buy it, give them a cash quote over the phone. And before I got started with any of the marketing, which I wanted to dive right into, my boss told me, David, I really think you should answer phones in the call center for a week before doing anything else. Just be like everybody. Now, I kind of viewed this as beneath me. These were lower, like probably minimum wage employees with like some commission on top, answering phone calls, people trying to sell their car, following a script. And I like to do this like deep work that made me feel important. I have this big ego. I was young and dumb. And I just like kind of rolled my eyes and nodded my head at my boss and then just didn't do it. And I went ahead and I was responsible for messaging on the website, for ad copywriting, for trafficking the website, media planning. I was responsible for everything around communicating with the very people I basically refused to talk. And a little later on, I started realizing that marketing is a conversation, and it's a relationship. And
so, David, basically, you were in charge of the messaging, but you had not done any calls.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Not only did I not do any calls, I didn't listen to recordings of the calls or anything. I just assumed that my conversion rates and my click-through rates on my ads or other information was a good enough signal for what the customers actually cared about and wanted. But I remember vividly my boss like telling me like, trust me, David, just do this. And I just like, I couldn't bring myself to do it. And I regret that till this day, because I probably spent tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars waiting for the data to tell me about what the customers actually cared about, when I had the opportunity to actually hear it straight out of their mouth. And this is one of the reasons I don't have the opportunity today to sit in call centers. And I also realized as a marketer, one of the worst traps I could fall into is trying to fix things that aren't part of my purview. If my job is to make the phone ring or to generate quality leads, it's not my job to figure out what the call center could do better or to do worse. There are people running that. Human processes are rarely as simple as you would map them out on a piece of paper. So I try my hardest not to interfere or even offer critiques about that. However, I make sure to listen to call recordings. If I'm researching a new client or a new industry, I will, I've been trying to automate some of this, but I'll manually go read reviews. I'll give you an example for marketing agencies, especially around SEO agencies. I went to Yelp. This is probably about 3 years ago. And I filtered all the marketing agency and SEO agency reviews to show me the 1-star reviews. And I started reading through them. After probably about reading through 4 or 5 reviews, I started seeing a recurring pattern. Same pattern over and over and over again, which is overpromised, underdelivered. They promised us the world, and then we didn't get the results we were hoping for or expecting. They never communicated with us. We found problems that they should have found long beforehand. I don't even know what I'm paying them for. Are they even doing the work? I just keep on, getting an invoice every month, and I have no idea if they're even doing work. And so I this recurring pattern of lack of communication, and of what I discovered over the years about the mismanaged expectations is actually really interesting when it comes to hiring marketers. There's 2 things that happen. One is either they're not yet experienced enough to know what they actually can control. And so they get really excited about something from either another industry or a strategy that they've been successful with in other places, and they think it'll work, but they don't necessarily know how to tell the forest from the trees. They might not know why something succeeded. And so they get really excited, and that passion sells. And so that's one area where it's almost innocent just because they don't have enough experience to know how to kind of manage those expectations. In other cases, they might just be trying to sell. And more often than not, they didn't do a good job explaining what is within their control. So, for example, if I'm running ads on Google, I don't really.
They didn't set expectations.
Yeah, but it's more than that. They didn't set that. If I'm advertising on a search engine, I could send traffic to your website. That is the extent of what I'm capable of doing. Maybe how they get to your website or who I bring to the website impacts quality a little bit, but I cannot control, unless I'm doing conversion rate optimization, how they're going to interact with the website, whether they're going to transact. If it's a lead that's being generated offline, I don't know how your call center is going to handle the lead. I don't know. Like, there's so many pieces of the puzzle that, like, I'm still accountable to it because my advertising has to be profitable, or my SEO has to be bringing in quality traffic. But understanding that the campaigns I'm running should only be accountable to one goal, which is, am I bringing in more of the right kind of traffic or bringing in, leads at the right cost per acquisition? But very often you'll be asked to do competing priorities. Oh, we need you to get us more volume for less money and higher quality. The problem is the levers to optimize those things are different levers, and they're often competing. And sometimes you have to strike a balance, but more often than not, it's a tug of war where you're being held accountable to the wrong metric. So, because it's just not diagnostic of what you're capable of doing. So I think a lot of times that happens as well, is that you hire somebody for a specific service and they're not very clear about how they're going to measure success and what success looks like. And then you end up just being accountable to whatever headache and problem there is. There's a worse problem with this, which is when things are actually working well. Because when things are working really well, it's very easy to get complacent and step back and just like say, oh, it's working well. I don't need to get involved. I don't need to do anything. And then you overlook problems that end up becoming much, much bigger problems later on in the future. And what ends up happening is most headaches with agencies are almost always a function of how the business is doing in general. When the business is doing well, they love their agency because it's not a headache. When they're struggling, they try to control everything they can. And then they start pushing their agency to fix this and fix that. And 3/4 of the time, those are things that are outside of the control of the agency, outside of the scope of what they can control. But you're in it together. So it ends up being like creating a lot of friction, which leads to a lot of these, they promised the world and didn't deliver, or they didn't communicate with us at all. And so I find a lot of these problems boil down to also just relationship and collaboration. The real point of all this is that there's nothing more important when you're marketing to recognize that you're participating in a conversation with the customer. So whether I liked it or not about answering those phones, the reality is that I was part of that conversation. And the fact that I didn't listen made it almost impossible for me to empathize and understand what their actual needs were and pain points were. And it also, one of my practices now as I listen to call recordings, it uncovers new opportunities. One example is with an addiction treatment center I was working with. And I heard a phone call about, it was actually HR at a company, a trucking company, and wanted their driver who had a DUI getting back on the road because they were struggling to find good drivers. And they asked, are you Department of Transportation certified for addiction treatment? Now, as far as I'm aware, that certification doesn't actually exist. But
really,
right?
Huh.
Yeah, I don't think so. But the bottom line is that they know that the Department of Transportation regulations or their licensing regulations says if they have a DUI, they have to go through a certain amount of addiction treatment in order to get back on the road and be a safe driver. And the company just wanted to get them back on the road safely as soon as possible. But that opened up an entire market and segment I never would have known existed if I didn't listen to that phone call. I wouldn't, there's all sorts of strategies you could target that industry. Someone could probably even open up an addiction treatment center focused just on DUIs for transportation and probably do really well because they'll own that niche.
I love that. I'd love to hear your other methods for customer research, because one of the big lessons and big takeaways is actually, just listening to the customer, doing the customer research. One of the ways was to listen in or answer calls. Another one is to listen to call recordings. Another one you mentioned was to do deep research on Yelp and look at reviews. I know another one people do is look on Amazon reviews for a product or a book. I'm curious, are there any other customer research, because as we know, the most powerful copy, David, doesn't come from the best copywriters. The best copywriters listen to the customer and just repeat basically. I'm not going to just minimize what copywriters do. I know a lot of amazing copywriters, and they have a great job of just crafting it so it all makes sense sequentially. But ultimately, a really important piece is listening to and repeating back what the customer is saying, but also evaluating their deep-seated fears and other things, pain points behind it. So I'd love to hear your other customer, great, points on how else do you do customer research and your tips and tricks.
So that's a great question. There's a lot of things I do. The first thing I always do is I try to start identifying trade associations and conferences and looking at exhibitor lists from those conferences. So I'll do like a backlink analysis of a website. And then if I see that, they're part of this and this trade association, I'll then do a backlink analysis of that trade association. And I'll start building this kind of like 360-degree view of the industry and how it's interconnected. And then I start picking up on things. But when I want to actually get into the customer's head, the way I see it is customers people want to be seen, they want to be heard, they want to be understood. So a lot of companies, they'll do focus groups, they'll survey customers, and those are all great. But what I find to be probably the most valuable is to listen to the common complaints. And there's actually a genius company. I forget their name, A&M or something like that. I don't know, something like that. They're a big Amazon seller. What were they doing? They were finding really popular products on Amazon. Let's just say hypothetically, it was a Bluetooth speaker. And then they would read through all the reviews and they would look for certain buzzwords like, this is awesome, but it would be even better if it worked in the shower. And then what they would do is they would basically just build that exact same speaker, but make it waterproof. And then package it as a waterproof product just like it. So
and there's their copy. It even works in the shower or whatever.
Exactly. So it's very, very important to listen to what people actually complain about. This is really a different a discussion, a story for another time that maybe we'll talk about. But I remember with there, in junk cars, there was a promotion running. One of our competitors was running it, giving a free $500 gas card. And the call center was getting calls with complaints. I sold you my car. I never got my gas card. And we never had that promotion. But one day I get a phone call from the person running the call center. He's like, David, get this off the website. You have to figure out a way to, remove that promotion. We don't offer gas cards. I'm like, it's nowhere on our website. I don't know what you're talking about. He insists. He's like, I don't care, David, figure out what's happening and get rid of it. And what I learned from that really interesting is I had a light bulb go off in that moment. It's like, wait a second. The customers are telling you exactly what they care about, exactly what they want. Why in the world are we trying to get rid of it? Why aren't we hunting down, trying to figure out how to offer a $500 gas card? And so there were other insights we got from that as well, which is that there's no brand differentiation in the junk car industry. So
obviously, because they were mistaking you for another company.
Exactly. No one can tell the difference. And that's kind of deliberate and it's kind of okay in that market. But customer, like you think about complaints and people often try to figure out how to solve it or be a little more clear about what they don't have. But just listening to the questions people ask and the complaints they have and this is great, but this, all of those are brand positioning. There's this brilliant copywriter who I almost partnered with a long time ago, who he worked at Ogilvy and other big agencies for many, many years, won a bunch of awards. And he, it was during the 2008, I guess, the bank, housing meltdown crisis or whatever. And he said, some bank is going to emerge from this as the brilliant genius, always put the customers first by building a sustainable brand. And I don't remember who it was exactly, but he recognized that when everybody's complaining about something, that is exactly
an opportunity.
The brand. That is the brand positioning to deposition them, to take over the market, to really get in there, because people are telling you exactly what they care about. Now, they also imply what they care about with the way they behave on your website, the way they interact with different ads. So there's lots of different ways to get that information. And I try to just listen everywhere and try to put myself in their shoes. And then one other thing I try to do is every time I buy something, every time I catch myself reaching into my wallet, I try my hardest to tune in to my emotions. How am I feeling? What am I thinking about? Why am I making this purchase decision? And I just file it away in my mind. And I try to look for those patterns in other situations. And it lets me have certain buyer empathy. So, just paying attention to what hooks you and what you buy is often, because humans, we're more similar than different. as much as we like to believe we're all unique. Most of our core needs and behaviors and emotions are driven by the same, the need for significance and things like that. I just want to share one other detail around research for copywriting. I think his name's pronounced Stefan Georgi, but
I've talked to Stefan. Yeah.
Stefan.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
he has a framework called RMBC, Research Mechanism, Brief, and Copy, where he doesn't just blindly, like I was going into complaints and reviews and just trying to see what people seem to like focus on and repeat. But he seems to have like a very specific framework for looking for the right pieces of information, because you really have to come up with that mechanism. I think that's probably the key to everything else. So looking for that, like, what's that one thing that everybody assumes they have to do, that if you can remove that barrier, will make it a no-brainer. I don't know if that's a great way to describe mechanism, but I do think, and I haven't been through his formula, but I'm very impressed. And he's supposedly one of the most prolific copywriters out there. He cranks out sales letters like I crank out words out of my mouth, which I love talking. So
yeah, I mean, his RMBC method, is great. And I've actually talked to him about this. It stands for research, mechanism, brief, and copy for anyone listening. And it's funny because when you go to the RMBC method website, I always love going to the website, because obviously if they're teaching copywriting, you're reading their copy on their page. And so it starts off with, this simple 4-step copywriting method took me from a broke and living in a trailer to generating over $700 million. And then he has got a video there and explaining it. But yeah, I love just some method. I've heard the, different methods throughout the year, like the AIDA, which is like attention, interest, desire, action method. So yeah, I totally think having some framework is really smart, but it goes back to kind of the foundation, Dave, is what you're saying, which is it's listening to the customer. It's listening to the pain, the needs, the wants, and watching the actions of the customer.
Yeah, 100%. That's definitely what I see for sure is the biggest opportunities. So anywhere the customer's talking, I want to pay attention. So whether it's answering the phones, listening to call recordings, reading reviews that they write, looking at their social media posts, finding random blog posts, there's people still blogging on Blogspot, these, neighborhood people talking about things, and they might be talking about hiring, a landscaper to fix their leaking sprinkler, which is something I dealt with today. And there's insights there. There's brilliant insights. And the best insights are often the simplest and easiest. Yeah. And you just have to listen and pay attention. And it's there, and it's a gold mine for differentiation.
Listen to when people are complaining. And it's funny because you probably resonate with the RMBC, because the first thing is research. And he says, research is the number one factor in whether or not your sales copy is effective or not. It's also the most overlooked. And he says it's true for both writers who are starting out or veterans. And the last thing is RMBC is copy. Like, that's what's interesting. The same thing you're saying is the last thing you write is the copy. The first is get it doing all the background and the research. So totally. David, that's what fixing incentives is all about. It's about doing things that change behavior. What moves the needle to change behavior? So I totally appreciate your expertise in sharing, what you said was the dumbest mistake you ever made, which you have since learned from. So thanks for sharing that. People can check out more episodes of the podcast, which I encourage people to do. And they can check you out on your website as well, at davidmelamed.com. And any other places we should point people towards online, David, are those the best places?
Those are the best places right now, unless they want to just, hunt me down on LinkedIn. I try to write on LinkedIn a little more than on other platforms.
Cool. All right.
Sharing those.
Everyone, check it out. And we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Fixing Incentives podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.